folks, you know you're in for a treat when you hear that sound because it's time for another week of the RecPoker podcast. I'm so happy to be here. I've got the best job in the world. My name is Jim Reed, and you can find out more about me by going to rec.poker/Jim, or you can find out about the rest of the Wrecking Crew by going to rec.poker/crew. And I've got one of the Wrecking Crew members with me here today, Rob Washam. Why don't you tell the world where they can reach you?
I'm Rob Washam, and my handle is Rabman50, just about anywhere you can find me.
And Rob's one of the great folks behind the scenes here that make everything work, along with website AMPS, Mark Prashine, and of course the great team at Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino that help us keep the lights on here every month. And I want to take a moment here just to thank a couple folks who have joined our premium membership over the last little while. This is definitely my favorite way for folks to interact with RecPoker is through the premium membership training stuff that we do here, conversations with pros, strategy discussions, hanging out with poker celebrities, and just getting more kind of quality time with each other over Zoom and in the other engaging opportunities like that. So specifically Harold Berry, who has been a lot of fun having him in the conversations. We've exchanged some cool strategic insights, and Elizabeth Bennett Martin, who another of my Canadian friends up here, who I know has a lot going on right now with the new company that she's starting. But Elizabeth, thanks for joining the premium membership and for being such an insightful member of our panel in the conversations that we've had over the last little while. So speaking about insightful members of the panel, one of the people that's doing a lot more work with RecPoker lately is Gareth James, who is no stranger to the show. You've heard of him before. He's the genius behind the MTT Poker Academy and all the other great coaching and training material and programs that go over on at the MTT Poker School. So Gareth, thank you so much for coming back to the show and for dropping some knowledge bombs on us.
Well, thanks very much for having me back on. I can't have done too bad a job on the first time through, hey. So it's always good to get invited back on to something.
That's right. It tells you that you're doing something right. I think that's good. That's good advice. So since we last spoke, why don't we just start with talking about what we're doing together on these Saturdays. So since we last spoke, you've gotten more involved with your own MTT Poker Academy, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And you're sharing some of that great knowledge with our RecPoker Premium members. So on the third Saturday of the month, every month we're gonna, or at least for a while, we're gonna be hosting this Q&A study group where RecPoker members can come to talk to you about the training material that you're sharing with our members every month. So in the first month, you shared a video about flop play, how to flop strategy when you're in position as the pre-flop raiser with about 40 big blinds. And we spent like 75 minutes, I think, in our session just talking about different board textures and sizing. And I know the next video you've got available for our members is about the turn. And we're going to get together on January 15th and talk about turn strategy. So first of all, just thanks so much for getting more involved in RecPoker and for sharing this information with recreational players like us, because I think this is exactly the kind of thing that we need to be thinking about. Is there something about sort of the recreational player or something a bit like you have a very clear educational approach to coaching and training? I know you've got a history as an educator. Can you just speak a little bit about like that philosophy and how you think you connect well with players like us?
Sure. I mean, I guess it all comes back round to when I was a teacher. So as you mentioned about having the education background, but at the same time as being a teacher, I was a part-time player, right? So I used to play when I could. As a teacher, it was a lot of hours, so I wasn't playing too much in term time, but school holidays, definitely getting in there, battling, especially in the summer holidays. We had like 6 weeks off, 6 weeks to play. There was a time when I was a teacher when I used to teach for, get to school at 7:30, leave at 6, come home, log straight on, play an online session, go to bed at 2 a.m., rinse and repeat. And yeah, I definitely don't recommend that to anybody out there. So don't do that, guys. Learn, as I say, in a lot of my coaching and a lot of my live streams, learn from my mistakes. let's you don't copy any of this. The mistake part, obviously the good stuff you should take on board.
Well,
So go ahead.
I mean, that's one thing just right off the top. I think, recreational players, especially, people that like to listen to podcasts and kind of like learn passively and on their own. I think we feel like we need to learn from our own mistakes. And I think even just part of a learning mindset, the notion that you can actually learn from other people's mistakes, that you don't actually have to feel that pain yourself. That is something that we should all do better. Why other people can kind of show us some shortcuts or ways to learn the lesson without actually feeling the pain ourselves. So I think that's exactly what we should be doing. That's well put. Yeah.
I mean, I've had coaching in the past, of course, and one of the biggest gripes for me was that some coaches are not prepared to just be humble and say, you know what, like, I got it wrong. Like, we as poker players, there's no poker player in the world, I don't think, that can play every hand perfectly. And you never want to feel, in my opinion, like you've got to that point where you're playing perfectly. There should always be something to take from your session to learn, right? So if you feel like you've got to the point and you're like, yeah, I'm not learning anything more, I don't want to learn anything more, I think I'm playing perfectly, you need to have a serious look at your game, because there's probably so much that you're not getting right, whether it's like choosing the wrong bet sizing or the strategy is completely wrong, you're thinking about hands in the wrong way. So yeah, I think the most important thing is to be humble. And certainly, I've done some live study streams before, and we go through a hand, I completely butchered it, and that's okay, right? There's no like, oh yeah, but if we change the parameters a little bit, if the big blind doesn't play this way, then all of a sudden my hand looks really good. I see that a lot in training videos. It's like, guys, just be okay with making a mistake and learning from it.
I love that. Yeah, and I think we've talked before about how you really do never stop learning or finding ways to improve. And if you do, what it really means is that you don't know what to look at to find those areas, right? So and you do a lot of live work with players in webinars, and so there's a lot of interaction and feedback. So how valuable do you think it is just to have someone who's not you looking at your game and just sort of like seeing the stuff that maybe you're too close to it to see yourself?
Yeah, it's the classic, you don't know what you don't know, right? It's the unconscious incompetence. That's where a coach is going to really be really valuable, because they're going to be able to identify things that you weren't even aware were wrong. That's something that I've been working on recently, actually, because a lot of players have approached me and said, can you go through my game? Can you highlight the different areas of my game that I need to work on? It's kind of linked with the sort of this feeling of overwhelm. There's so much content out there. There's so much training material out there that it can sometimes be confusing or overwhelming to know, well, where do I start? So sort of with these two ideas, one, people coming to me and saying, like, I don't know where to start, can you help me identify some areas to work on, plus the sort of sheer volume of content out there. I decided that I would put some content together myself that helps you identify these leaks, because again, one of the sort of the leaks, I guess, of training content is that there's just sometimes there's just like, oh, here's a random video on this, here's a random video on this, here's a random hand history, here's some random ICM videos. And I think, like, you might not be ready to explore ICM, you might not, you're still working on like what your pre-flop ranges should be, so you don't want to be suddenly going to final table strategy or ICM or anything like that, because there's still so much of the fundamentals to learn. So everyone's different. I think a lot of the content as well assumes that like everyone's coming from this, at the same stage. Everybody needs help with this particular topic, but some people will be good at certain areas and weaker in others. So it's really important certainly as a coach, to be able to help you identify those big leaks, the areas for improvement, so that you're not wasting time just watching random videos, trying to just work randomly on different things, and then you're like, you get to the end of the month and you think, well, what do I actually learn? Like, how is this benefiting my game? Whereas if I said to you, oh, I noticed you're not c-betting enough in position as a pre-flop raiser, right? This is one thing that I see all the time. People think they are c-betting enough, but it's nowhere near enough. And so as once we've highlighted that, you can, as you mentioned earlier, working with the rec members, the flop strategy in position as a pre-flop raiser, you can actually learn specific topics that are going to help you. So rather than finish a hand, let's say that I tell you that this is your leak, right? You're not c-betting enough in position against the big blind. Then you mark some hands, right? And then you run them in a solver, right? And you look in and you say, ace king, was that a c-bet? And that's no good, right? Looking at individual hands and going, giving yourself a pat on the back if it was a c-bet and you did c-bet, or whatever the word is, scolding, chastising, whatever, like, oh, you got it wrong, like, you idiot, what are you doing? Like, that's not very helpful. But if you can approach spots, I've identified that area for you, then you can look at like button versus big blind, and you can look across all different types of boards and develop a really solid understanding of how to approach that spot.
Yeah, because it's not like 20 years ago where there were only a couple good sources of poker strategy out there. Like now there are so many videos, so many books, lots of different ways to engage with other knowledgeable poker players. And I think finding the right fit from a coaching and learning point of view is important. But I think, as you said, like really the most important part is just distilling, like not even that so much, is really just saying like, what are the subsets of this game that you need to start working on? And then that can be a fairly general abstract conversation where you're just like, let's just talk about all the different areas where we could study, find the low-hanging fruit where you're going to make the biggest yields, and then get a little more granular and detailed in how to study those specific subjects. Because I can see how that way you sort of get to understand the context for it. You get to kind of understand how it works within the overall strategy. And it's not just a bunch of math and concepts sort of like washing over you every month without ever anything to anchor to. So how do you approach that at the MTT Poker Academy? Because I know you have like a series of modules that allow the individual students to kind of pick what they want to work on. And how do you help them figure out what are their areas that they need to work on themselves?
So, yeah, I started off. So 2 years ago, I'd started off this what is now the Academy, but it originally was just a group coaching program. But that didn't sound sexy enough. So we changed the name. But it was a group coaching program, and I wanted to basically produce a whole course on the most the most important topics or concepts within tournament poker. And over the course of 2 years, I did sort of essentially one module every single month and put together 24 modules that do tackle the most important concepts within tournament poker. And then what I realized was that as new members were coming in, I was just saying, right, well, here's all the content. Good luck. And that's just like, that was just never going to work. So I realized actually people are coming at this from different points. And the thing is with the Academy, we're not just, we take on players of different skill levels, but also different buy-in levels, right? So it's important to be able to help a player of any ability identify their leaks, and player of any stakes as well. So sometimes we normally say that like beginner intermediate players might be playing low and mid stakes, but there are you only need to watch some high stakes whole cards up replays on YouTube to see that there are some clearly very affluent people, but with not a lot of poker skill playing these games. So it's just not always correlated. So yeah, because the way that it works, I put together this content. So it's pre-flop and post-flop leak, or identifying your own leaks for pre-flop and post-flop. So it does rely on you having a decent database of hands. So one of the things I'm trying to just think about how this would actually work for players, maybe in the States who don't get to play online as much, or for live players, it's a bit more challenging. But for those players that have a decent sample of hands in their database online, it's really easy to go through the the module, see, track your stats, compare them to where they should be. Because what we're looking for here is not one that's, let's say that your c-bet number was 53, right? In positions, 53. That's way off where it needs to be. Sort of, you're looking at like 85%, right? But if your number was 82, well, you're kind of close. Like, okay, there's probably some work to do there, but there are probably some other things to work on. You're going to trying to get that extra 3%. You could be using that time to improve other areas of your game. So there's so what we're looking for here is the stats that are way off. And c-betting in position tends to be too low. C-betting out of position tends to be too high. 3-betting tends to be too low. Fold to c-bet tends to be too high. Fold to turn and river bet seems to be too high as well. So there are lots of things that we can look at within that. But you can work through now. So I used to, when I did it one-on-one, I used to have a form. You fill in the form. I can easily see where your numbers are at. What I realized is that obviously I have limited time to be able to do a one-on-one session with somebody. So I wanted to be able to help people identify their leaks on a bigger scale. So I put together this module, and you should be able to work through that and see where your numbers are at, how it compares to where they should be, and then you go, oh yeah, right, that's way off. That's where I'm going to spend some time studying, and then from there you're going, okay, so whatever the spot is, maybe you fold too much to flop c-bets. Well, we've got a module for that. You go and learn how to approach flop strategy from out of position. Maybe you're not barreling the turn enough, or you're barreling too much. We've got a module for that, turn strategy in position as a pre-flop raiser. So it should be pretty easy now to identify leaks and then go straight to the content and not get overwhelmed by 24 modules and me just sort of throwing you in there and saying, yeah, good luck.
Yeah, because it's kind of the same problem, right? It's like there's all this information. Where do I start? And especially for recreational players like us, there's an opportunity cost for that study time. So we have a lot of us have jobs, we have families, we have only so much time to play and study. So if we're studying things that we're not getting a great return on, that's kind of the opportunity cost of that is large. I think, we talk about recreational poker players having like an inchworm approach to getting better as a player. So, we all want to be making our A game even better and advancing that front of the inchworm and getting closer to being a perfect player. But it's our C game. It's the biggest mistakes that we're making behind that we actually need to advance. We need to close those leaks. We need to plug those leaks that are causing the most damage, that are the bottom of our game, bring them up. And that's how we're going to start making more money, performing better, understanding poker better. There's never going to be a shortage of chances to work on the front of your game. But, you're mostly, for players like us, we're going to see big results trying to just fix the worst part of our game.
Yeah.
So when you talk about like having like a database there, is that like, do you use Poker Tracker 4 or Hold'em Manager or something else like that?
Yeah, I use Poker Tracker, but I have, members of the academy and using Hold'em Manager. Some of you even using Hand to Note. So yeah, any of those three. I think there are others available, but I haven't seen them for a while.
Mm-hmm. And then people can, I guess, can go through that module even, every 6 months or once a year or something like that, and kind of establish some benchmarks for themselves and see how they're doing by comparison.
So I mean, I would definitely recommend doing it every 6 months. Obviously, it would depend on how much volume you're able to put in. But the thing is, over a course of say 12 months, your game's going to evolve quite a lot.
Good point.
So you, every 6 to 12 months, I think it would be good. I tend to do it at the end of a series, say a scoop or a W coop, not always 6 months apart, but might work out. So May and November, maybe something like that.
Sure,
could work out pretty well. I would do it every 6 months. You also want to, like, not just in the sense of continuing to identify your leaks, but also to actually track your progress, because part of confidence in your game is knowing that you're actually making progress when perhaps your results aren't a true reflection of your improvement, right? You could win a tournament, doesn't mean you got any better. You could brick 200 tournaments in a row, doesn't mean you're getting worse. Like it's just, tournament variance. Whereas if you see your win rate going up, or you see that your c-bet number is going in the right direction, or you see that you're three betting more frequently, or you're three betting from the right positions more frequently, then and these are things that you're working on, then that you can feel confident in that you're making the right improvements in the right areas.
Yes. Rob?
You talked about a review every 6 months or so. Isn't that more dependent on the number of hands you played in that time period? I mean, what would that number be that you would be searching for to make an evaluation of, hey, have I really improved or have I digressed?
Yeah, good. It's a really good question. So I think that 100,000 hands is a good number of hands, but I recognize that recreational players or serious amateurs or part-time players who have full-time jobs, not always able to get in 100,000 hands. On average, I want to say that you play something like 100 hands per tournament. So sometimes you play 3 hands and sometimes you play 400. And I want to say something on average is around 100. So 100,000 hands is only 1,000 tournaments. But yeah, that might still be a lot of tournaments. And then over 6 months, maybe just 50,000 hands, so half that amount. But yeah, you're right. You've kind of, it's a balancing act between wanting to sort of see the progress over time, but is that time 6 months or is it 100,000 hands? Yeah, sometimes that 100,000 hands is going to be 4 years of play. Your game is, well, we hope, is going to be very different, now compared to where it was 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I guess players like us that are playing only so many hours in a week and working and studying, we're actually probably doing our game is getting a lot better per tournament played than someone who's just out there like playing 20 tournaments every day. I don't know, maybe that's not really true. Gareth, what do you think is a good mix of time spent playing and time spent studying when it comes to actually getting better as a player? And maybe it's different from person to person, but I think some people that really like studying feel like, well, if I just spend all my time studying, I'm definitely getting better. And some people that feel like they just get better on the felt. Is there a right answer to that, or do you have a personal preference?
I mean, I've got no way of quantifying this, but I would say that you're more likely to get better if you study than if you spend a lot of time on the felt. I think a lot of players who feel like they get better by playing are those players who are going to be sort of biased in their
right.
They've witnessed certain things, and that's affecting their strategy, and that's guiding their strategy. So I would try to avoid that. I mean, it's the $1 million question as to the ratio. If you're a losing player, you should be studying more than playing. Once you get to a certain point, though, you need to be playing more than studying. Otherwise, you're leaving money on the table. So yeah, it's so tough to know exactly what the ratio is. But then, as I said, like, it will depend if you're a winning player or a losing player. And going back to what we were talking about at the start about being humble and honest, if you are a losing player, that's okay. Like, study more. But if you're, you got to make sure that you're actually honest with yourself as to where you're at, right? You don't want to say, well, I'm a winning player, so I'm just going to like 95 table every session, because you probably got loads of leaks. You've got to be really careful with that.
And I think it's, especially live players, it's easier to kind of fall into that trap because you don't see as many hands. You're not a very reliable narrator yourself about your own play, right? And I think also people kind of conflate feeling more comfortable with being better at poker, and it's just like, oh, well, I'm not so nervous at the tables anymore, I guess I'm better at poker. It's like, well, no, you're more experienced. And that definitely is an advantage. But what for players that do play more live, what's a good way for them to actually be honest with themselves? Like, how can they pay attention to results or to things that they can anchor to in that way? Because I know online it's just so easy to pull up Poker Tracker and have all your information there available. But for live players, is there a way that they can kind of like give themselves a little kick in the butt and look in that mirror when they need to?
Good. I mean, I don't know. It's a good question.
So yeah, we talk about people like taking notes and like, you know, good
Yeah.
record keeping, obviously.
One of the biggest sort of non-strategy leaks that I see is that the lack of lack of attention to detail when it comes to a hand history from a live player. So you say to them, right, make sure you note down some hands, you know, make sure you look at the action, the bet size, stack sizes, stuff like that. What was the board? And then you get a response which is, okay, so I raised and the big blind called and flop came ace high and I bet and he raised and I didn't know what to do. Right. Okay, so stack size, stage of the tournament, how big did you raise, what position were you in, what's your hand, what's the board, you know, there are so many things, and I guess that's the challenge of live play. I mean, I don't play a lot of live poker. You know, most of my poker is online, and I think, yeah, maybe I don't understand it fully. I'm spoiled because every hand I play is tracked, and I can review it the next day or review it straight after the session. There has to be a way, a more efficient way, or just an efficient way of noting down hands so that you can, share them with your coach or with your friend or study group or something like that. But yeah, it's tough. I know. I get.
Yeah, that's funny the way you say that, because you'll find that people that play a lot of online poker and then do their tracking with Poker Tracker, when they get into a live setting, they understand that you need to know what those stack sizes are and you need to know what position it was, you know. And so when you talk to somebody who does it both, they're usually more forthcoming with all the information than somebody who just plays live.
Yeah. And Rob, you take really good notes live. Like, this is I'm like Gareth. I'm spoiled by online play. Most of my play is online, and I actually feel like I have a bit of a handicap when I play live because my brain isn't just used to doing all that pot calculation math and, you know, paying attention to what everyone's stack size is all the time, because that's all on my computer in my head whenever I need it. So you've taught me a lot, Rob, about note taking at the tables, and particularly when it comes to profiling villains. Do you have a way to sort of track your results live as well? Because I know there's like, and then, you know, Kim Kilroy shared some keyboard with us for your phone that you can use symbols and stuff.
There's a
to
hand
track.
history
So that
keyboard.
Hand history keyboard, that's handy.
Yep.
I know there's some apps out there that you can enter your results in and things like that as well. But what about you, Rob?
Well, I don't play a lot online anymore, or live as much as I used to. But what I do is I keep track of every time the blind level changes on my phone. I'll put in what my stack is at that time. So then any hands that happen within that, I got a kind of a good feel for where I'm at stack wise. Nice. And then I'll put some specific hands in there. And then at the end of the tournament, I'll put how I finished. You know, did I finish, 100th out of 250 and not in the money, or did I finish in first? So that's where the tracking comes in. So if I really want to go back and see what I did, I can go back and look. But basically, I just do it by blind level. Every time the blind level changes, I go and put in my phone what the blind level is, what my stack is. So then any hands that come in between there, I've got a pretty good idea of what the stack sizes were.
Nice. Yeah, I think like recording it in real time has to be the key, because otherwise we're never going to be able to remember the details afterwards. Cool. Well, Gareth, I know we've kept you for about as long as we made you promise for. The next session that we're doing is on the turn strategy in position as the pre-flop raiser. So is this in the earlier session, we would get to the flop being the pre-flop raiser in position, and it was a question of, on all these different board textures, what should our c-betting frequency be, and when we do c-bet, to what size. So that's, and I think that's just like the building blocks of everything we should be thinking about poker is encapsulated into that module. So I was really pleased with that and the way that everyone enjoyed it. How do we take that to the turn? Are we going to look at the situations both where we c-bet on the flop and where we didn't c-bet on the flop? Are we gonna, how do we approach sort of the next street while still looking at everything, but also kind of staying focused on what's important?
Yeah. So the module we were looking at is if you see bet the flop, and then then you're on the turn as the person that see bet the flop. So you're still the aggressor, and there's some really cool things that happen on the turn. So just as a quick spoiler, when you as the in-position player against the big blind, you get to see bet a lot, generally because your equity is a lot higher. You have a nut advantage as well. Not always, there are some boards where the equities run a lot closer together. Your opponent often, can have a nut advantage instead, and those might be the boards that we end up doing more checking on. But when we have such an advantage in position and we see bet a lot, and our opponent our opponent calls, all of a sudden we've see bet everything. They folded all their garbage. So what happens is the equities actually run closer together. And then that's even before the turn card comes out, right? So we've gone from really high frequency C bet because we've got all the advantages, because we've got position, equity, nut advantage, all of these things going on. And then our opponent calls, everything changes, and then we see a turn card. And there's a way of grouping turn cards together. So another spoiler, we go from the flop, which I think you can group flops, in a lot of different ways. And then the turn, I think you can group the turn cards into 6 probably. And yeah, I mean, so I've kind of like, for anyone who's listening to this who hasn't watched that watch that flop module, the basic idea is that rather than saying I've got ace king and the flop's ace 6-3, what do I do? You're approaching it from the case of button versus big blind, 40 big blinds deep, and what's the board? How would you describe the board? It could be ace 6-3, but I would call that ace rag, or you get a paired board, or you get a monotone board. Lots of different ways to group these boards together, and thankfully we can do that. Otherwise, we'd have to learn 1,755 strategically different flops, which
right.
probably going to be outside most humans' capabilities.
Yes, I think so.
So then we've got that idea, and we're like, okay, we can approach flops, and this same technique works for 3-bet pots. It works for being out of position as a pre-flop raiser. It works for being out of position as pre-flop caller. It works for multi-way as well. You can always categorize flops and approach it from that point of view rather than your exact hand. And that's what we're always taught. Focus on range. What does your range want to do here? And then, okay, what does my hand do? So then when we get to the turn, the turn can change everything. So the turn could be a complete blank, but it could also pair the board. It could also be an overcard or an ace. Those are quite important cards. It could complete a straight. It could complete a flush. So you've got to think about all of these things. And once you approach the sort of the strategy from that point of view, and approach a hand from that point of view, then poker strategy gets a lot easier because you're sort of reducing the complexity of each each hand, each game tree, to something that's probably, or hopefully, more manageable for humans.
Yeah, and that one point I want to jump off on there, and then Rob, if you've got something to close us out, this notion I think recreational players in particular need to do a better job at, and you just nailed this, Gareth, right off the bat, is you're c-betting because people overfold to c-bet. So you're c-betting with a really wide range to a really small sizing typically in these spots. The reason you're doing it is because your opponent folds a lot. So then when they don't fold, what is left in their range? They've already folded all these garbage hands. I think that's something that we don't do enough at as recreational players, is thinking about, okay, we're using Flopzilla, we've clicked the filter button. Now, what has actually passed through that filter? Like what has our opponent's range contorted itself into since we've taken this action? And particularly when we do things with like larger sizings, people continue, and then we're like, oh, but how often does he really have X, here? Like, well, no, because he folded a lot of that non-X stuff earlier. And I think that's something that we just need to do a better job of paying attention to. And I think the way that you talk about it and the way that we kind of graphically, visually reference it in the learning materials makes it really easy for players to just kind of like see it and have that aha moment, where it's just like, oh, well, actually, that is what that range looks like in that kind of a spot. That really helped me think about poker a lot, for sure. Rob, did you have something?
I was just going to say, this is really timely what Gareth is doing with us, because it's matching directly with what we're doing with the book study
Right.
in modern poker theory. We just finished the whole chapters on raising pre-flop and then the c-betting and then defending against the c-bet. And the next session, we're going to be getting into turn strategies, which is going to be on the 19th. So
Right.
it's going to be like just a few days after, we do the turn strategy with Gareth. So it's going to, the two of them are just going to match up so well together that I think people can take advantage of what Gareth is going to be doing, and then what we're going to also be talking about in the book study, and bring those two together and really see how it all works. And I just wanted to put a shout out there, because in the book study, right at that point of the turn strategy, he mentions a book called Purposeful Practice for Poker. Is what he's saying. It should be the book that everybody's reading so that they could practice this stuff. And I know you're familiar with that book, Gareth.
just a bit, yeah. So I was reading Modern Poker Theory a while ago and got to that page, and I thought, hang on a minute, that's our book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. One thing about that book as well, Michael groups the flops together as well, but in a different way. From the way that I approach it. So I think, there's more than one way to skin a cat, as it were, and you got to go with which way you prefer. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it works, like having read the book and looking at the way he categorizes flops to then the way that I categorize them, and I'm not going to be offended if you prefer his way, but yeah, I'm sure some of you will like the way that I've done it as well.
It's probably just a blend of both. That will work for most people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I like that. It was cool seeing that in the book, because we were just talking about that book in your other session, Gareth, in the flop class as well, talking about places where people could get some help to start thinking about that conceptually, because that's really what it takes. And then, just like you said earlier, and then we can find these examples and work a little more concretely on the examples and the details and how to apply it. But yeah, so, and I'll just tell, so folks, if you're listening to this, this comes out on Tuesday, January 11th. So if you want to join us on Saturday the 15th at 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central, was that 6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Greenwich
over here, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So that's happening this Saturday. We'll be talking live with Gareth. All premium members are welcome to join that. And then the following Wednesday, the book study, Rob will be going through that very section of Michael Acevedo's Modern Poker Theory. And if you want to do that, to become a premium member at RecPoker, all it costs is $5. Go to rec.poker and sign up. Use code RecPoker to get that first month for only $5. And join us. Get your pins shipped out to you free. There's all sorts of good reasons to join up in January. Well, Gareth, thank you so much for coming on here. Rob, did you have another question there before we let the man get off to his supper?
Just I enjoy Poker on the Mind. I listen to it all the time. I think you guys are great together. Got a lot of great information. So I encourage everybody out there to listen. It's great podcast.
That's great, Rob. I mean, you've done a much better job of plugging the book and the podcast than I have. So I really appreciate that.
Well, yeah, Gareth, you've been contributing to the poker world for years and years, and I think the first time that we worked together, I was taking one of your free webinars. Feels like forever ago, talking about post flop hand ranging. What is the best way for folks to reach you, and what are some areas that you're working on right now that you'd like people to pay more attention to?
So I guess head on over to mttpokerschool.com for everything that you need, basically. If you're interested in improving your tournament poker game, it depends on where you're at. If if you're a newer player to the game, or you enjoy free content, then there's YouTube, there's Twitch live streams, there's the podcast. There's information about all of this on the website. And if you do want to take your game further, there are three routes with me. I have my online course that I mentioned before. There's the academy that Jim mentioned, and then there's one-on-one coaching as well. So all the info is on the website. If you want to check that out, then yeah, go ahead.
Nice. And if folks head over to rec.poker/resources, they can probably even find a little discount code to start the new year off on the right foot. And I can't tell folks enough. Gareth really knows what he's talking about. He's got a great coaching manner. He just really knows how to connect with people and how to talk about poker in a way that makes sense for them. So I do encourage people to go and check that out and listen to the podcast and everything else. So Gareth, keep shining your light in the poker world, man. Thank you so much for your time here, and we'll look forward to talking with you again sometime soon, I hope.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers. Take care.
All right. Well, without any further ado, then, I'll thank Gareth James and Rob Washam for joining me here. Website AMP and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. And all of you, the listeners, for making this happen. Talk to you again soon.